Can you imagine finding out, at the very moment you're supposed to be celebrated, that someone has been quietly rewriting your entire financial story? Stay with me, because what began as a single congratulatory toast at my graduation dinner will unravel decades-deep secrets, and I'm done letting them stay buried. If you've ever felt the ground shift under your feet the second family money is mentioned, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. What would you do if the people you trust most held your future hostage? I'm Sarah Whitfield, 24, freshly minted economics major from Redmond University, and up until last night, I believed life finally had a straight line I could follow. I'd mapped it all out with quiet precision, land a junior analyst role at Sequoia Capital Partners, split a shoebox apartment with my best friend Janine, and start chiseling away at the student loan boulder that's been shadowing me since freshman year. Simple, predictable, safe. So when Grandma Jean insisted on hosting my graduation dinner at Birch and Barrel, a reclaimed barn restaurant that smells like hickory smoke and heritage breed pork, I thought the evening would be a pleasant victory lap before real life clicked in on Monday. Candles flickered in antique mason jars, violins drifted through hidden speakers, and everyone kept telling me how radiant I looked in my thrift store sundress that I'd sworn passed for chic minimalist. Dad, Thomas Whitfield, a genial CPA who can quote baseball stats faster than the stock market, raised his glass first. "To Sarah," he said, voice steady, eyes shining, "the hardest working kid I know." Mom, Linda, all pearls and perfect posture, beamed. Even my older brother, Mark, who'd flown in from Denver for exactly 6 hours between data analytics deadlines, clinked my glass and whispered, "Proud of you, Squirt." Everything felt right. Then Grandma cleared her throat. Grandma Jean is 78, a retired librarian with silver curls and an X-ray gaze that sees through excuses. She tapped her spoon against her water glass, once, twice, until the table hushed. "To my brilliant granddaughter," she began, voice warm as cider. "I couldn't be prouder of how wisely you've stretched that little monthly gift Grandpa and I set up. What was it, $1,500? All through college. Look how far it carried you." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Monthly gift, $1,500. The violin solo evaporated. Conversation blurred into background static. For 4 years, I'd balanced 2 part-time jobs and lived on rice and coupons because money was tight. I'd never received a dime beyond modest birthday checks. Yet Grandma spoke as if this stipend were common knowledge. My gaze darted to Dad. He stared at the tablecloth, knuckles white around his glass. Mom's smile flickered, brittle as a winter leaf. Mark blinked, brows knitting in confusion that mirrored my own. I forced a swallow past the sudden desert in my throat. "Grandma, what monthly gift?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone braver. She tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. "Sweetheart, the education fund we deposited into your account every month since you were 19. Your parents assured us it helped cover books and, well, everything." A canyon opened inside me. 4 years of 5 a.m. cafe shifts, spreadsheet tutoring sessions until midnight. Yet there was supposed to be money? $1,500 a month would have annihilated my loan balances. Where had it gone? No one spoke. Somewhere beyond the reclaimed barn walls, a train horn wailed, long, low, accusatory. I set my napkin on the table, heart thundering so loudly I half expected the Edison bulbs overhead to flicker. "I'm sorry," I whispered, pushing back my chair. "I need some air." Mom reached for my wrist. "Sarah, let's not make a scene." Her tone, silky, warning, made my pulse spike. Dad finally lifted his eyes, and the guilt pooling there confirmed what I already feared. They knew. I eased my arm free, forcing my expression neutral, my strategist mask. "I'll be right back," I said, though I had no intention of returning until I found answers. Outside, the June night smelled of lilac and charcoal. I paced the gravel lot, phone trembling in my hand as I pulled up my bare-bones checking account and the student loan app I checked obsessively. Balances unchanged. No secret deposits. No miracles. The stars above the old barn shimmered, indifferent. In that moment, I realized the straight line of my life had never been straight at all. It had been quietly bent, siphoned into someone else's pocket. Can you feel that adrenaline spike the instant you decide silence is over? Because standing under those string lights, dress hem-brushing dusty boots, I made a promise. I will uncover where that money went, and I will reclaim every piece of my life that was stolen while I slept. Stick around. The polite daughter you met earlier is already history, and the quiet strategist you've never seen before is stepping into the spotlight. I didn't sleep that night. After slipping out of the dinner quietly, no big farewell, no scene, just the sound of my heels clicking against the wood porch of Birch and Barrel, I took the long way home. The rhythm of my footsteps, the cool June air, the heavy swirl of disbelief pressing against my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't rage, I thought. Because here's the thing about growing up in a house like mine. You learn to stay quiet, to observe, and you learn that the truth doesn't hide behind screaming matches or accusations. It hides in the paperwork. By dawn, I had 2 cups of coffee in me, a stiff neck from the couch, and my laptop glowing with more browser tabs than I could count. I started with what I had, the old congratulatory binder Dad gave me before college, supposedly documenting the Whitfield College savings plan. I'd always thought it was a sweet gesture, even if it had more pie charts than dollars. But last night gave that gift a whole new flavor. I flipped through the pages now with fresh eyes. Behind the motivational quotes and general budgeting tips, there were a few outdated bank statements. Most were from my high school years, showing the slow drawdown of the initial fund. But something didn't sit right. One label, Educational Expenses Joint Account, kept surfacing, attached to modest withdrawals. The thing was, I'd never had a joint account. Still, it was a thread. I logged into my old student checking account and began digging. I had to reset the password and pass a dozen security questions that felt like pop quizzes from a past life. Once inside, I scanned every transaction from the last 4 years. The familiar pattern was there: cafeteria charges, bookstore purchases, rent Venmos. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I wasn't looking for what I knew. I was looking for what had been done around me. Then it hit me: endorsements. I remembered Grandma used to send birthday checks, always in her flowery cursive. I'd thank her, tuck them away, and now I wondered if some of those had disappeared. I searched my email for scanned check deposits. A few from freshman year popped up, but then something odd. A $1,500 monthly deposit labeled GJW Transfer Education in my sophomore year logs. I didn't recall seeing it. The statements showed it entering and immediately leaving, often the same day. The money never stayed. I pulled up the routing number. It led to an unfamiliar account. My fingers hovered. Then I copied it into a trace tool. The name that popped up made my stomach flip. Thomas Whitfield. My father. There it was. Over 40 deposits, each matched with a withdrawal into his joint account. Not mine. A laundering operation hiding in plain sight. I stared at the screen, mind racing. It wasn't just about money. It was about permission, trust, control. About who gets to shape your future while pretending they're supporting you. But confronting them head-on would only close the doors I needed to keep open. If I blew up now, they'd lock down everything. Documents, explanations, access. I needed to stay quiet, smile, play dumb. A strategy was forming. I created a folder, Project Lantern, because I was done stumbling in the dark and started screenshotting everything. Transactions, dates, account numbers. I backed them up to a cloud drive, double encrypted. If anyone asked what I was working on, I'd say I was helping Janine with her startup pitch deck. Plausible, innocent. By noon, I was back in the kitchen, calmly slicing strawberries like the world hadn't tilted sideways. Mom breezed in wearing her Pilates gear and offered a too bright, "Good morning." Dad followed, adjusting his tie, humming like always. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, almost kindly. I looked up and smiled. Eventually. I didn't blink. I stirred my yogurt like it was just another summer day. But inside, my grip tightened around that spoon. They'd underestimated me. And honestly, that was their biggest mistake. I started keeping secrets the way I used to collect syllabi, systematically, with color-coded tabs and careful footnotes. I couldn't afford a single misstep now. Not when the stakes were this high, and not when I was still piecing together how deep it all went. Every evening, once Mom and Dad settled into their routines, her with her decaf tea and Real Housewives, him with his Wall Street Journal and ice cubes clinking in his glass, I would retreat to my room, lock the door, and become someone else. I became the detective of my own life. At first, I thought I was chasing one isolated betrayal, a financial lie with tidy borders. But the deeper I went, the more layered it became. The transfers didn't just link to Dad's account. Some rerouted briefly through a secondary joint account under the name Educational Expenses, Whitfield Holdings. It sounded official, almost charitable, but the paper trail led to an address, our own. They'd created a shell account. For me, but only on paper. My hands trembled the first time I said it out loud to myself. This was fraud. Not just parental overreach. Not just borrowing. Fraud. And yet, each morning, I smiled at them, like I hadn't read through hundreds of transaction lines the night before. Like I hadn't found the forged digital signatures, supposedly, from me. I studied those PDFs until my eyes blurred. My signature, copied and pasted with the precision of someone who knew where to find old permission slips. But the hardest part was acting. That quiet Sunday morning, Dad offered to review my job search budget with me, like the mentor he'd always pretended to be. He pulled up a chair beside mine, gave me a fatherly nudge, and smiled like he hadn't siphoned away over 70 grand. "How's the job hunt going?" he asked casually. I could smell the cinnamon on his breath from the muffin Mom had baked, could hear the fake warmth in his voice that suddenly made my skin crawl. "Still applying," I replied smoothly. "Takes time. I'm thinking about revisiting my FAFSA history, just to get a clearer picture of what I owe." He nodded, not flinching. That was the moment I knew he didn't think I'd do it. He still thought of me as the dutiful daughter who'd nod through explanations she didn't understand. So I gave him a dutiful smile in return. That night, I scoured old FAFSA forms, hunting for any inconsistencies. That's when I realized the expected family contribution had always been off. Low, too low, if our family was actually depositing $1,500 monthly for my education. Either Grandma never reported the gifts properly, or someone fudged the numbers. I was spiraling through spreadsheets when my phone lit up. "Mark, you around? Need to talk." Mark, my older brother, the golden boy, the one who'd never asked about tuition or groceries because he'd always had his pick of internships and favorable breaks. I didn't expect him to be curious now, so when he asked to meet the next day, I braced for a smug lecture, or, worse, an intervention. He picked a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. I arrived early, laptop bag in hand, and ordered a cappuccino I barely touched. When Mark arrived, he looked more tired than usual, less polished. "All right, Squirt," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I know something's up. Grandma called me last night. She's confused. Said you seemed blindsided." I blinked slowly. I hadn't spoken to Grandma since the dinner. "Did she say anything else?" He nodded. "She said you didn't know about the fund, that you walked out, that Mom looked like she'd seen a ghost." I said nothing, just sipped the now cold cappuccino. He leaned in. "So was there money? Or wasn't there?" I met his gaze. There was, but not where it should have been. He raised an eyebrow, and I realized I had to choose. Let him in, or shut him out. But then he said something that caught me off guard. I looked at some of Dad's old transfer logs once. Years ago, something didn't add up then either. His tone was softer now, thoughtful. I told myself it was just accounting stuff I didn't understand. My breath hitched. "Are you offering to help?" "I'm offering to look," he replied carefully. Transparency, right? I didn't know what scared me more, that he might be sincere or that he might not, but I was too deep in this web to navigate it alone. So I nodded. "Okay, I'll show you what I've found, but if you breathe a word of it to them..." "I won't," he said quickly. "You have my word." I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. But trust is a currency, and in our family, it had been devalued long ago. The universe has a strange sense of timing. Just when I thought I was barely holding the pieces together, it handed me a thread, unexpected, but strong enough to grip. It came during office hours. Professor Langford, my senior thesis advisor, had been my academic anchor since sophomore year. She wasn't warm in the conventional sense. No doting, no emotional hand-holding, but she had a rare kind of clarity that made you feel seen. She read between lines no one else noticed, in papers or in people. I'd stopped by to ask for a reference letter, just something to keep up appearances. But my voice cracked halfway through the request. She peered at me over her glasses. "You look like someone trying not to panic," she said bluntly. "What's going on?" I hesitated. It would have been easier to lie. Tell her I was tired. That post-grad life was overwhelming. But then I remembered the color-coded folders, the midnight spreadsheets, the falsified transfers. And I heard myself say, "I think my parents have been stealing from me." She didn't blink. "Explain?" So I did. Not everything. Just enough. The unexpected checks, the diverted funds, the shell accounts. I even showed her a few screenshots from my Project Lantern folder, including the routing numbers that tied the money trail to my father. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "This isn't just a family squabble, Sarah," she said. "This is financial misconduct, possibly criminal, depending on how the money was reported and used." I nodded, the word criminal clanging in my chest like a warning bell. Then she said something that made me sit up straight. "I want you to talk to someone. The University Legal Clinic. They handle cases like this, quietly, ethically. It's pro bono, and they're very good." I blinked. "You'd connect me?" "Of course," she said. "You're not alone in this, and you deserve to know your rights." For the first time in weeks, I felt the icy grip of isolation begin to thaw. She scribbled a name and number on a yellow sticky note and handed it to me like it was nothing. Like justice could start with a scribble and a door cracked open. And maybe it could. I left her office clutching that note like it was a lifeline. Because maybe it was. I thought I was prepared for every angle. I had documentation, backup files, a growing list of transactions, and now, thanks to Professor Langford, a lifeline in the form of a legal clinic. But what I wasn't prepared for was being discovered. It happened 3 nights later. I'd just finished a call with Maya, one of the clinic's grad students. She had a calm voice, razor-sharp questions, and a way of speaking that made even terms like, quote, constructive fraud and unauthorized fiduciary misdirection sound like a lullaby. I felt both safer and more terrified after hanging up. I patted down the stairs to grab a snack, still riding the adrenaline wave, when I heard voices. Low, urgent. "She's digging through old accounts. I saw the folder. She's not just being nosy, Tom. She's documenting." It was Mom's voice. Tight, controlled. My blood ran cold. I froze in the hallway, one hand gripping the stair rail. Dad sighed. "We knew this might happen. But it's not like she can prove anything unless she goes public. And she wouldn't. Not with everything we've done for her. Done for me?" There was a pause. "And if she does, she won't. We raised her better than that." The way he said it, like obedience had been my greatest virtue, like gratitude was a leash I should never have dared to loosen. I crept back upstairs, each step like a gunshot in my ears. By the time I shut my door, I was trembling. The game had shifted. They weren't just lying, they were preparing. I was no longer investigating in silence, I was now a threat. And threats get managed. The next morning at breakfast, Mom poured my coffee with practiced elegance, smile glued in place. "Sweetie, we thought it would be a good time to review your budget. Make sure you're not overextending yourself with all this legal talk and stress. Maybe scale back your job search." Translation: sit down, stay quiet, we're tightening the reins. Dad nodded beside her, pretending to skim his email. "We just want you to feel supported." I looked at the two of them, so polished, so casual. It almost worked, almost made me question if I was the one spiraling. But then I remembered the phone call, the whispered hallway strategy, the word managing. That was the moment the last thread snapped. "I'm fine," I said evenly, sipping the coffee she poured. "And I don't need budgeting advice right now." Her lips tightened. "No need to get defensive, Sarah. I'm not." My voice was calm, calculated. "I'm just managing my priorities." A pause, a flicker of something behind her eyes. She knew. We all knew. The masks stayed on for the rest of breakfast, but the temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. Later that afternoon, I returned from a walk to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. I always closed it. Always. Inside, my desk drawer was askew, files subtly repositioned. Nothing was stolen, but nothing was untouched either. It wasn't paranoia. It was a message. If this was war, then they'd fired the first open shot. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I made backups of my backups. I texted Maya a single sentence. I think they know. Her reply came 2 minutes later. We move faster then. Meet tomorrow. No delays. No delays. They'd tried to rattle me, shake the strategy out of me. But all they'd done was confirm I was right, and that terrified them, and that gave me more power than I realized. You think you're prepared for confrontation, until it knocks on your door, wrapped in your mother's perfume and your father's disappointed silence. They didn't even wait a full day. I just returned from my meeting with the legal clinic, a file of preliminary findings zipped safely into my laptop. Maya and her supervising attorney were amazed at how much I'd already compiled. This could build into something serious, they said, cautious but impressed. It felt validating, empowering, for about 5 hours, because that evening they called me downstairs. No warning, no pretense, just, Sarah, come to the living room, now. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms folded like a disappointed principal. Mom sat on the edge of the couch, back straight, hands perfectly folded in her lap. She always did that before delivering bad news like it was a gift-wrapped etiquette lesson. You've been snooping, she began. No greeting, no preamble. Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was controlled. I've been researching, I replied quietly. Dad exhaled sharply, shaking his head. We gave you everything. We sacrificed to keep things stable, and this is how you repay us? With accusations? That word hung in the air like smoke. Accusations. I met his eyes. You took money that was meant for me. It was for you, Mom snapped. We used it to maintain your life, your appearance, your options. Do you have any idea what would have happened if people thought we couldn't afford college for our daughter? I stared at her. But I could have afforded it. With that money, I wouldn't have needed loans or to work 16 hours a week while pulling straight A's. You let me believe we were barely scraping by. She flinched, just slightly, but then her jaw set. You're being dramatic. Dad stepped forward. You're not being fair, Sarah. Families make choices. It wasn't your place to question ours. There it was. Control, image, obedience. The holy trinity of the Whitfield household. You forged my name, I said evenly. Silence. You moved money into an account I couldn't access. Under my name. That's not a choice. That's fraud. Mom rose, voice trembling now. You're ungrateful. After everything we did for you, we didn't steal. We redirected, for the good of the family. And now, Dad added, you're dragging lawyers into this? Strangers? You want to destroy us? No, I said, voice firm. I just want the truth. Mom's voice turned icy. If you go through with this, you'll force our hand. No more support. No more protection. You'll be on your own. I nodded slowly. I already am. For a moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room and the roaring ache in my chest. Then I turned and walked out, calmly, quietly. No dramatic door slam. No screaming match. Just clarity. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to protect their illusion, and now that I'd shattered it, they were willing to cut me loose. Grandma called the meeting. Not Mom, not Dad, and certainly not me. It was scheduled for Saturday at 3 p.m. sharp. No excuses, no delays. Her voice on the phone had that librarian's steel in it, the same one that used to quiet entire classrooms full of middle schoolers with a glance. Everyone will be there, she said. We need the truth laid out, all of it. I didn't ask how much she knew. I didn't have to. Saturday came thick with humidity, the kind that clung to your skin and made every breath feel like work. We gathered in her sunroom, surrounded by potted ferns and lace curtains that fluttered slightly with each oscillation of the ceiling fan. It was the same room where we used to open Christmas presents and eat strawberry shortcake on birthdays. It looked exactly the same. Nothing felt the same. Mom sat stiffly in one of the wicker chairs, her smile polite and ghostly. Dad stood near the windows, arms crossed like he was guarding something invisible. Mark leaned against the doorway, neutral but alert, his laptop bag by his feet. And Grandma, tiny but unyielding, sat in her wingback chair, a notepad and pen resting in her lap like a judge preparing her final remarks. I was the last to arrive. All eyes turned to me, and I could feel the weight of their expectations, their deflections, their practiced narratives. "Sarah," Grandma said gently, but firmly, "why don't you begin?" My throat tightened. For a second, I questioned everything. Was I really going to expose my parents in front of the woman who raised my father? Was I ready to peel away every layer of denial they'd built over the years? Then I remembered what they said in the hallway, what they said in the living room. "You're being dramatic. You'll be on your own." And I realized I already was. I pulled out my phone and opened the file I'd prepared the night before. "I'll be brief," I said, steadying my voice. "Over the last 4 years, a monthly deposit from Grandma and Grandpa, meant for my education, was redirected into an account I didn't control. Each transfer was made under the guise of educational expenses, but the money was never used for my tuition or books. It went into a joint account held by Dad." Dad opened his mouth, but Grandma raised a hand. "I have digital copies of every transfer," I continued, "as well as several checks deposited with a forged version of my signature. The routing numbers all trace back to the same account. I've verified everything with a legal team." Silence. And then I pressed play. I'd recorded our kitchen conversation, the one where Mom warned me to stop digging, the one where Dad dismissed the investigation as unnecessary. Their voices spilled into the sunroom, calm, composed, damning. When the clip ended, I let the silence do the rest. Grandma's hand didn't shake as she reached for her phone. "I'm calling my lawyer," she said softly. "We need a full accounting of every cent." That's when Mom broke. Tears welled in her eyes. Not the manipulative ones I'd seen before, but something rawer, realer. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. "We didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "Everything was falling apart. Your father's consulting work dried up. We had to keep up appearances. For church, for the neighbors, for the school board. We couldn't let them think we were failing." "You weren't failing," I said, voice hollow. "You were lying." Dad stood frozen, color drained from his face. Grandma looked at both of them. "You stole from your daughter, for image, for pride. That ends now." And just like that, the illusion cracked wide open. You think you've seen the full picture, until someone slides a new frame into place, and suddenly everything looks different. That someone was Mark. After the dust of the sunroom, confrontation began to settle, and Grandma's lawyer was officially looped in. The mood shifted from shock to logistics. My parents sat like statues while she made her calls, her tone brisk, efficient, legal. I didn't say much. I was still reeling, still letting the emotional weight of my mother's tearful confession settle in the pit of my stomach. But Mark, he stood up. "I think it's time I show you something too," he said, pulling his laptop from his bag. Everyone turned to look at him, even Dad. He sat at the small coffee table, opened the screen, and with a few practiced clicks, pulled up a folder labeled Whitfield Transaction History, Consolidated. "I didn't want to get involved at first," Mark began, his voice steady but distant. "I thought it was a misunderstanding, maybe some accounting confusion. But Sarah let me look at her findings, and I ran some deeper data pulls. I have access to analytics software at work, so I used it." "What are you talking about?" Dad snapped, his voice cracking for the first time. Mark didn't flinch. "I ran a pattern match across all Whitfield-linked accounts using historical bank data. Yours, Mom's, even the dormant ones from the years before Sarah started college." He tapped the keyboard. Graphs filled the screen. Transfer flows, amounts, dates. "It turns out," he continued, "the education fund wasn't the only pool of money being moved around. There were other contributions. Holiday gifts from Grandma and Grandpa, birthday checks, even tax returns Sarah never received. Over $30,000 more, quietly funneled into the same joint account." I stared at the screen, my heart climbing into my throat. This wasn't just the $1,500 monthly gifts. It was everything. Dad looked stunned. "Mark, you went through our private financials?" Mark's eyes were cold. "No, I went through Sarah's, and the moment your name showed up on the transfers, I had a right to know." Mom buried her face in her hands. "I even found a few payments to a private club," Mark added, his voice low now. and luxury home maintenance services. So yeah, the money didn't go to tuition. It felt like a second betrayal and a first rescue, all at once. You knew, I whispered to Mark, before, didn't you? He hesitated. Not everything, but I suspected. I just didn't want to believe it. We sat there in silence, surrounded by potted plants and sun-bleached photographs of happier times. While Grandma's lawyer arrived and began the preliminary documentation, the room turned clinical. Contracts, promissory notes, asset assessments. Mark stood beside me, no longer in the doorway, but fully present. And for the first time in this whole nightmare, I didn't feel alone. It's strange, the way silence feels different after a storm. In the days that followed our sunroom reckoning, the house became a museum of unsaid things. Doors closed softer, voices lowered. Mom barely spoke unless spoken to. Dad shuffled around like someone permanently out of breath. And me? I floated somewhere between relief and grief. The legal clinic worked with Grandma's attorney to draw up a mediated agreement. Nothing criminal, yet, but formal, detailed, binding. A portion of the misappropriated money would be returned to me. Over time, through a trust account monitored independently. Grandma insisted on it. Mark reviewed every clause before I signed. His silence while he read was heavier than anything either of our parents had said in weeks. When he finished, he nodded once. This is fair. Not enough, but fair. He was right. The agreement wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about drawing a line, one they couldn't step over again. The payout would help. It wouldn't erase the student loans or the years I spent stretching $5 meal plans, but it would buy breathing room, and something else too. Clarity. I packed my things the day after we signed. I didn't wait for anyone to help me. Just folded clothes into boxes, unplugged my desk lamp, deleted my parents from my online banking list. As I zipped my last suitcase, Mom appeared in the doorway. "You don't have to leave today," she said softly. I looked up at her, tired, smaller somehow. "I do." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "We never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said, and I meant it. But knowing didn't fix anything. She watched as I rolled my suitcase down the hall, past the family photos, past Dad pretending to read the paper. I didn't stop. The driveway felt wider than I remembered. Mark helped me load the car. As I slid into the driver's seat, he paused. "You're stronger than they ever knew," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but now I know. Starting over doesn't come with a banner or a clean break. It comes quietly, through the sound of boxes being unpacked in a modest third-floor walk-up, through the hum of an air mattress in a still empty bedroom, through your own breath when you realize no one else is listening." I moved into a small apartment just off campus. Technically temporary, but it felt permanent enough. It smelled like fresh paint and someone else's forgotten spices. Janine, my old roommate, offered me her futon and a week's worth of groceries as a kind of welcome gift. "You don't owe me rent right away," she said, "but I will absolutely charge you emotional rent if you don't tell me what the hell happened." I laughed for the first time in days. The legal stuff was ongoing. Forms, follow-ups, formal apologies typed in font size 12 Times New Roman. My parents hadn't contacted me since I left. Not once. And somehow, I didn't miss it. Not the performative concern, not the curated family image. What I missed were things that never existed to begin with. Transparency, real safety, unconditional love. I spent my mornings applying for jobs again, this time with a refreshed resume and something sharper in my tone. I no longer described myself as resilient or adaptable. Now I said what I was, strategic under pressure, with first-hand experience in financial audits. Let them read between the lines. And in the evenings, I helped Maya with a side project at the clinic, building a guide for students navigating hidden financial abuse from within their own families. She said I had the voice for it. I wasn't sure, but I tried, because telling the truth, even quietly, still felt like power. One night, a letter arrived. Real paper, real handwriting. It was from Grandma. "I'm proud of you," it read. "Not because you exposed the truth, but because you held on to yourself when everything tried to silence you." I cried for a long time after that, not out of sadness, not even grief, but for the space that had finally been made, for something honest to grow. You don't wake up one day suddenly whole. You wake up, piece by piece, and realize the wounds don't sting as sharply, that the silence in your phone isn't loneliness, it's peace. That the version of yourself you had to become to survive might actually be the strongest part of you. 6 months passed. The money came through. Not all of it, of course not. Some of it had vanished into untraceable luxuries and the void of image maintenance. But the portion Grandma's attorney secured was enough to stabilize my footing. I paid off half my loans, got a part-time gig as a data assistant for a non-profit, and 2 weeks ago, I received an offer letter from a financial compliance firm in Seattle, a full-time position, competitive salary, benefits, and a clause I added myself, internal fraud detection access. Funny how life brings you back around. The morning I signed the contract, I stood by the window of my new apartment, the one I picked myself. No one co-signing, no strings attached, and watched the early sunlight spill across the kitchen tile. It looked like gold, like possibility. A text came in. "Mark, heard about the job. Proud of you, Squirt." I stared at it for a long moment before typing back. "Me? Thanks. Hope you're well." He was still distant, still trying to sort out what it meant to grow up in the same house, but wear different scars. But I wasn't angry. Some people rebuild faster than others. Some need more time to step into the light. And my parents? I hadn't seen them since the agreement was finalized. I heard through Grandma that they were stepping back from local committees and appearances, that their social circle had shrunk dramatically. Reputation doesn't endure the way people think it will, not when it's built on borrowed money and silence. They didn't apologize, but I stopped waiting for that, because here's what I've learned. Closure isn't an apology, it's choosing to heal without permission. One evening, while sorting old documents, I found my acceptance letter from Redmond University. I read it once, then folded it back into its envelope. I did this. I built something from nothing, not because they cleared a path, but because I refused to stay lost in theirs. I no longer needed to prove anything, not to them, not to anyone. The past would always live in the cracks of my story, but the foundation was mine now, and it was solid. So here's my question for you. Have you ever walked through fire and come out carrying your own light? Tell me in the comments. Because someone out there might still be in the middle of their story, and your voice could be the one that helps them find their way out. And if mine helped you, then I guess all of this, every betrayal, every buried truth, meant something after all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for believing me. And most of all, thank you for letting me believe in myself again. This is Sarah Whitfield, and I finally, truly know who I am.